March 1991, Saddam Hussein's army is crushed by the American-led Allied forces of Desert Storm. They savoured their moment, honoured their dead, and prepared to go home victorious. But only now, 8 years on, are other casualties being counted, and the list grows daily. For the very first time in that war, the British and American military used a new and devastating weapon. It was coded DU. It stands for depleted uranium. It has left in its wake, on and around the battlefields, radioactive and highly toxic dust that lasts for over 4 billion years. It can kill, it can deform. And yet the soldiers of Desert Storm were allowed to wander the battle zones unaware and unprotected. Tonight, we ask why.
We need a basic understanding of depleted uranium hazards.
We ask why this once secret US Army video, made specifically to warn of the dangers of DU, was only made after the war was over.
Depleted uranium dust or smoke may be inhaled if respiratory protection is not worn. It may also be picked up and ingested if gloves are not worn. Heavy metal poisoning may occur, which can cause damage to internal organs and tissues. The second concern, radioactivity.
We ask why, 8 years on, its contents have been shown only to a select few of the frontline men it is meant to protect. And this could be the poison carrier. Nicknamed the Warthog, the American A-10 Thunderbolt is being blamed for much of the DU contamination. A-10s fired over 700,000 rounds during the Gulf conflict, and most were made of depleted uranium. The Pentagon and our own Ministry of Defense were much impressed by it. It was cheap and plentiful, a waste product of the nuclear industry. So what an ideal way of getting rid of nuclear waste, by killing the enemy. It sliced through Iraqi tanks like the proverbial hot knife through butter. The military called it their unstoppable magic bullet. American tank crews fired a further 14,000 DU shells, but the British, or so the Ministry of Defense insists, fired less than 100. But both governments claim then as now that it poses no real danger, unless of course you are at the receiving end of it. Which is nonsense, if you believe this American Army video we've obtained.
Damaged and contaminated equipment is covered to prevent spread of contamination.
It confirms the fears of a number of leading international health experts we've spoken to. They warn that DU is an indiscriminate killer, that it is capable of being dispersed by the wind and contaminating the land for generations to come. Now, could this possibly be the cause, or at least a factor, in the so-called Gulf War syndrome? So who's right and who's wrong? Whose propaganda do you believe?